Stalker, Clear-Sky is the sequel/prequel to Shadow of Chernobyl, developed by GSC Game World. It was released in 2008 for Microsoft Windows exclusively. Now, Shadow of Chernobyl was a flawed but deeply compelling game with a rich, believable game world and some fantastic environments with great atmosphere. So, how does Clear-Sky stack up against its predecessor? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Let's just find out, shall we? I feel I should mention that, like my Shadow of Chernobyl review, I'm going to be taking a look at this game without mods, so if that's something that's going to irritate you, then you should probably just stop watching right now. So Clear-Sky takes place before the events of the first game, and you play a mercenary named Scar, who soon finds himself tracking down Strelok and his group of stalkers. Scar's plan is to stop Strelok from reaching the middle of the zone, where it's believed something really bad is going to happen. You start off in the swamps where the game introduces you to the new mechanics, and then you arrive back in Cordon, and you're free to go and do things at your own pace once again. One of the best things about Clear-Sky is revisiting all of those locations from Shadow of Chernobyl and seeing what they used to look like, and also interacting with characters and different factions before they rose to power. You'll be revisiting familiar areas like Garbage, Yantar, the Red Forest, as well as a few new additions, whilst interacting with traders to sell and buy new gear, and defending camps and bases from mutant and bandit attacks. One of the main mechanics of the game is the way you can side with different factions in the game by helping them out with missions and so forth. If you're in good enough with a faction, they'll quite often let you join up with them, which will give you access to unique gear and weapons. It's a cool system, and the way it's implemented is actually pretty good. I had a few times when I was in a gunfight with some bandits, and then one of the factions I was sided with just happened to show up and help me out. It was pretty awesome. There's not really a right or wrong faction to join up with, and I think your choice is going to come down to what type of loot you want to receive from doing so. Visually, Clear-Sky is about on par with the first game, though there seems to be a bit more detail with the architecture of buildings and interior areas. The lighting once again is absolutely amazing, especially at nighttime, and during a sunrise or sunset, the game looks great with some truly gorgeous skyboxes and god rays. It may be a 6-year-old game, but some of the textures are still more higher res and detailed than what you'll see in most recent games. There's an updated HUD which is a bit more streamlined, making it easy to tell what type of damage you're taking, but oddly they've gotten rid of the hunger and thirst system. Weapons, character models and items are all just recycled from the first game. In fact, it often feels more like a glorified expansion pack than a fully blown sequel. The real major change is with artifacts, in particular the way you obtain and then use them. Firstly, you now need armor with slots that let you equip them in the first place, and then secondly, all artifacts have a plus or minus radiation value, which has a huge effect on the player. So if something has a plus radiation value and you do not have a minus radiation value artifact to counter it, you can't even equip the artifact, or else you'll slowly die from radiation poisoning. It sounds like a nuisance, and it is. Finding artifacts in general now involves using a detector and having to walk right up into the middle of anomalies to draw them out. Often you'll die countless times as the anomalies will rip you to pieces, if the radiation doesn't kill you beforehand. I only bothered getting artifacts as a means of making money, and the fact that their placement is fixed means there's not really any enjoyment to be had searching for them anyway. Another really cool new addition is that you can repair broken weapons and also upgrade existing weapons through certain traders that you come across in the game world. Alright, now that's pretty much all of the nice things I have to say about this game, and that's because Clear-Sky has some of the worst shooting mechanics I've ever seen in any FPS game. The issue with it is that they've taken skill practically entirely out of the equation, and it all just comes down to blind luck. So let me break this down. In any other game, if you put your crosshair on something and press the trigger, you will hit what you're aiming at. But in Clear-Sky, it's like this. You aim at something, you pull the trigger, and then you roll the dice. Sometimes the bullet will hit, most of the time it won't. Now, much like the first game, you do have to play this on the highest difficulty, which means that you'll die in fewer hits, but so will the enemies. This is a good thing mostly because it means that all you need to do is get 1 or 2 well-placed shots to down an enemy, but it also highlights just how horribly designed this mechanic is in Clear-Sky. Aiming at someone's head and firing means the bullet should hit them in the head. It shouldn't miss them 1 out of 6 times as an artificial way to simulate recoil or weapon shake. It should go where the fuck you're intending it to go. And this is why Clear-Sky's shooting falls flat on its ass, because you're entirely at the mercy of some sort of number crunching system that is deciding whether or not your bullet is going to hit the mark, alongside things like whether or not your weapon is going to randomly jam mid-fight. It seems as soon as the player picks up a weapon, its insides are replaced with sawdust. You'd think crouching or different firing modes would change your accuracy, but it doesn't do a damn thing, and once again crouching is totally useless in general. The height difference between crouching and standing in this game is the height difference between whether or not you're wearing thick or thin-soled shoes. Now look, this would be fine and dandy, but the issue is that this system does not apply to your enemies. I mean, you could be shooting at someone from a distance with the exact same gun as they have, and yet when they use it, it's much more powerful and accurate, and you'll die in a matter of hits. All the while his buddies throw grenades a football field's length to land right at your goddamn feet. Grenades are by far the worst inclusion to the combat. It's literally instantaneous death. I mean, 1 minute you're just sitting behind cover, then the next, you're dead. Even in game, when you're fighting enemies using the most basic weapons like AKs or other pistols, they'll drop you like a bag of dirt, and there is no skill in any of this. There is no strategy, and most importantly, there is no enjoyment to be had. This was a similar system used in Shadow of Chernobyl, but for some reason it seems much more pronounced in Clear Sky, and much like the prior game, the starting areas are crushingly difficult because of it. For the first area in the game, you've got very basic armor and some crappy short to medium range weapons that are just absolutely useless in the environment you're fighting in. Also, when you're shot, you often start bleeding out, and yet for some reason, bandages are now something of a rare commodity, so if you don't have any in your inventory, you may as well just load a quick save or else suffer a slow death. Yes, it is true, the further you get into this game, the easier it becomes, but I don't see that as a valid excuse for the early areas in the game being flat out unbalanced and broken. That's like telling someone that swimming through a river of shit isn't that bad because there's cotton candy at the end. Look, I still swam through a river of shit. It's not like I can unswim that river of shit. Not the classiest analogy, but you get my point. There's even other stylistic choices that don't make much sense. I mean, there's a point halfway through the game where they take all of your money away from you and they don't give it back. Like, whoever thought that would be a good idea, honestly. Now look, I'm all for realistic shooting games, you know, games where you can only survive a handful of bullets. It's enjoyable if it's done well. I mean, games like Rainbow Six handle this mechanic perfectly, but Stalker really does not. Clear Sky on the whole is just an utter disappointment. With every step forward, it takes 2 steps back. They've put in a fast travel system, but it costs you money as an example, and like the first game, there's just countless instances where the game breaks the very laws of nature and common sense. I had so many instances where after loading a quick save, the time of day or the weather would just randomly change, or, you know, enemies would stop attacking me entirely and just go back to patrolling as if I never existed. Not only does it ignore all of the problems and glitches of Shadow of Chernobyl, but it adds its own as well. Unlike Shadow of Chernobyl, this is not a game that grows on you, unless that growth is some kind of cancer or sexually transmitted disease. This is a clusterfuck of epic proportions. Any semblance of enjoyment or interest that could have been gained from the prequel storyline is crushed by some of the worst gameplay I've ever experienced in a shooting game. What has this game got going for it? Well, that's a good question, Sonny Jim. Again, yes, it does have a phenomenal atmosphere, the kind of thing that most other so-called horror games can only dream of. The night and day cycle is seamless when it's not bugging out, and the updated visuals mean the environments often look photorealistic. It should be mentioned that the Stalker Complete mod fixed a lot of the issues I had with this game. With this mod installed, I didn't die a dozen times to the first enemies I encountered in the game, though a lot of problems still exist. Like AI characters turning sawn-off shotguns into sniper rifles, and that annoying MG nest when you first arrive in Cordon is still there. It doesn't fix everything, but at least there's a little bit of light at the end of this tunnel. There's no right or wrong mod to use here though, I just found that this one seemed to be the best for what I wanted to see fixed. But with vanilla Clear Sky, there's just far too many problems to make it worthwhile. The core gameplay is horribly flawed and just ultimately not very enjoyable. Trying to force your way through this game is like having a tooth pulled through your asshole. Next week, I'll be taking a look at Call of Pripyat and we'll see whether or not they return to form for the final game in the series. Fingers crossed.